As women, we worry about our safety. That's nothing new. But cases like this make me terrified to even be out in broad daylight. Knowing that your life could be taken away by a complete stranger just because he felt like it. Hi guys, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Zara, and on this channel, we talk about true crime. So if you're interested, please join the fam, hit that subscribe button, guys. It means so much to me, and hit the like button too. It really helps out the channel. And share this video if you like. We love our mobile games on this channel, but if you're tired of the same old style of games, let me introduce and thank Scatter Slots for sponsoring today's video. Scatter Slots is the top free-to-play casino app and involves no real gambling, guys. It's just a fun distraction from the stresses of life and a way to keep your mind busy. Apart from having 10 million active players around the world who enjoy the real Vegas experience, what makes it unique and stand out is its dark fantasy theme. It doesn't just have the same old Lucky Sevens and Diamonds theme, it's the only adult slot casino game with cool characters and fantasy elements. Different worlds, each with its own unique theme and atmosphere, like the dark and mysterious Castle of Counts to the colorful and fun Fruit Frenzy, which makes it different to anything you've ever tried before. The music is also a vibe if you're into classical compositions, but in modern arrangements. So as you spin, you progress through the map and then unlock new slots and missions. You can hit free spins, big wins, mega wins, and jackpots daily. They even have hourly bonuses to make it even more exciting. You can play the game both online and offline, which makes it great for long car rides or even in the plane. And there's a multiplayer tournament mode and a single player adventure mode. There's also a feature to play with friends called clans, so you can join an existing clan or create your own clan, defeat bosses as a team, and get rewards. So if you're down for a magical journey through different worlds, head on over to the link in my description box, or you can scan the QR code on the screen and download Scatter Slots for free now and receive a huge bonus, guys, 12 million free coins. Thank you to Scatter Slots for sponsoring today's video, and thanks to you guys for always supporting me. Let's jump back into today's case. Justine Valdez was born in 1993 in a small town called Abducted in the Philippines and was the only child of her parents Teresita and Danilo, who were known as Tess and Danny. Justine went to a Catholic high school called St. Teresita's Academy, and in around 1998, when Justine was still a very little girl, her parents decided to move from their small town of Abducted to Ireland. Abducted was a poor town, mostly agricultural, with farmers growing rice and onions, and the most common form of transport is a scooter or motorbike with a sidecar welded on. They wanted to move there to find work, to be able to provide a better life for their daughter and build a legacy for her. Justine meant the world to Danny and Tess, and moving to Ireland was not easy for them, as they had to leave Justine behind in the Philippines to live with family. She lived with her maternal grandparents Marcelina and Alfredo Calusa, and many Filipino families move overseas to other countries, work there, and then send their wages home to their families. Justine grew up in a happy home. She was known as a really fun and really nice girl. She had many friends and was known to be extremely kind and friendly to those around her. Justine loved music and was driven to pursue her dreams. She saw her parents sacrificing so much to give her a better life, and she didn't ever take that for granted. Many years later, in 2015, Danny and Tess finally felt that they had achieved their goal and were able to move Jastine to Ireland to live with them. The reunited family of three lived in a cottage on the grounds of the Charleville House, which was this beautiful home owned by a wealthy family. Danny and Tess worked together for the family on these grounds. Danny was the greensman and Tess was the housekeeper who looked after the main building and home. Pretty soon after moving and settling in Ireland, Jastine began her studies in accounting and finance at Tarte IT, as well as worked part-time jobs, one as a carer and then one as a server in a restaurant in Bray to help her parents pay for her education. Although she had been apart from her parents for so many years, she was still extremely close to them. She was used to staying in constant contact with them when she wasn't at home, letting them know where she was a lot of the time. I'm always so amazed by parents who have to do this, separate from their families and kids to work in another country so they can provide for themselves and their families, especially when they give most of their money away to their families overseas. I was in Dubai a few years ago at a friend's house, and their housekeeper was from the Philippines. She was this lovely, funny woman, and she told me that her husband and kids were back in the Philippines, and she gave almost all her income to provide for them back at home. I was just blown away, and honestly, it really broke my heart because she said she doesn't really know her kids. It's not the life she, ever imagined growing up. But as a mom, you do what you gotta do. It's just crazy and so sad that some families are not able to be together for a lot of their life. I couldn't imagine not growing up with my mom and dad around. So I consider myself lucky. We should. In November 2017, Jastine began dating a guy named Joseph Squire. They matched on Tinder and began spending a lot of their time together. Joseph described Jastine as being happy and active. She was never a troublemaker. She never drank, smoked, or took drugs. Joseph said she was the most innocent girl he had ever met. On May 19th, 2018, Justine had now been living in Ireland for over 3 years, and on this day, it just started out like any other. It was a bright but cold day in County Wicklow, and Justine left home and headed to the town of Bray, the same area as the restaurant she worked in. She had a short morning shift at the restaurant and then a 2 p.m. appointment at Bray Garda police station to renew her residency permit. Throughout the day, she kept in constant touch with her parents. She exchanged over 63 messages with her mom on Facebook Messenger. They were just having general conversations and laughing and joking. At about 4:20 p.m., her mother, Tess, sent her a text message asking her to pick up some bread on her way back home. After meeting with an immigration officer at the Bray Garda police station, Justine then headed off to Ben Dunn's gym at Cherrywood Business Park in South County, Dublin. She finished up at the gym after 5 p.m. and then at 5:20 p.m. she got on the 185 bus from Bray to Enniskerry Village. The bus ride took about 40 minutes and then Justine got off at her stop at around 6 p.m. From there, she had a 15 to 20 minute walk to get back home. However, despite that short walk, the fact that it was still quite early in the evening, the fact that Justine was pretty covered up, wearing her gym clothes, Justine would never make it home that day. But because Justine always made sure to let her parents, especially her mom, know where she was, if she was running late, if she made other plans, Justine not coming home after 6 p.m. immediately raised red flags. Her mother instantly grew very worried and knew something was wrong. Danny and Tess tried calling Justine multiple times, but by the time she was over an hour late home, they contacted the guards, which is the Irish police. However, sadly, their call was not the first call the police had received regarding Justine. Because it was still earlier in the evening, people had seen Justine get on and off the bus. Justine was also gorgeous. She was only 5 feet tall, but was slim with long black hair and beautiful brown eyes. She was still wearing her gym clothes, which were gray leggings, a white t-shirt, sneakers, and a dark jacket. Like I said, Justine would have arrived at her stop after 6 p.m. and would have begun walking home shortly after that. But at 6:24 p.m., around the time Justine would be very close to home, the police received a call. A woman named Susan had been driving in her car with her son when she saw a man driving a Nissan car pull up to the side of the curb with no warning, no lights, no blinkers on. He just abruptly stopped. She initially saw the man grab a girl, an Asian girl with dark hair, and then she saw her sitting in the back of the car in the trunk, and the girl looked at her with sort of a pleading look, looking for help, before the man shut the trunk, and then the girl began screaming through the window, trying to get Susan's attention. She heard the driver shout in a deep voice angrily at the girl, and at this point, Susan began to feel something was obviously wrong. The driver then got back in the car and then sped off. Susan, although in complete shock, managed to get the make, the model, and the registration plate off the car before running frantically into a nearby pub to call the police. The police arrived pretty quickly and found it hard to really validate Susan's story since there were no other witnesses. She told police the car was a dark-colored Nissan Qashqai SUV and the registration plate was 171D20419. But they did search the area where Susan said the man snatched the girl. Later, they ended up finding a smashed phone and a plastic bag with bread inside. Around this time is when the police received a call from Jastine's parents, and then everything clicked.
Can you tell us, Superintendent, about Jastine's last movements? Was she on her way home? Did she get off a bus?
Yes, we believe she was going about her business yesterday, and she was on her way home to Enniskerry, and we believe, or we think, she may have been abducted from that area. So we're working on that at the moment, trying to clarify her last movements, looking for CCTV, taking statements from witnesses, and we have a large investigation team working on it.
Justine was abducted in broad daylight in front of witnesses. 10 minutes after Susan had seen Justine get taken in the Nissan car, which would have been just after 6 p.m. So at 6:20 p.m., another witness named Gareth Thompson was leaving the area of Bray and traveling towards the N11, which is a major road that runs along the east coast from Dublin to Wexford. He was driving directly behind a black Nissan Qashqai SUV and noticed what he thought was a child in the back of the car. Gareth noticed a little girl waving. She had both hands up and she had a concerned look, but she was sitting at an awkward angle. It didn't look like a comfortable way to be sitting inside the car. And then I'm also guessing she was sitting in the trunk. So he was like, what's going on? He felt odd about this sighting. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. So once he arrived home at about 7:20 p.m., he immediately called the police and informed them of the incident. Since Justine was so small, being just 5 feet tall, it wasn't surprising that Gareth, who only saw her for a moment, assumed that she was just a little girl. After this third call, police now knew that Justine was in serious danger. They began interviewing witnesses and sent out a helicopter and a patrol car to search the area. They knew that Justine was in a black Nissan Qashqai SUV, knew that her abductor was transporting her to a secondary location, and the probability that they would find her in time was very low. They didn't know what her abductor wanted from her, and Justine had no enemies and never caused any trouble. She was an innocent woman, just snatched off the street. The police began looking through CCTV and traffic cameras, trying to find the SUV and the route it was traveling. However, day turned into night and it became dark and there was no sign of the car or Justine. However, at around 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, police went to a home in Bray, County Wicklow, and knocked on the door. They were able to find out the address the Nissan was registered to. They found it was registered to a woman named Nicola Hennessy. However, when they arrived at the home, the car wasn't in the driveway. Nicola was questioned, and obviously she was not the one driving the car. However, she did have a husband, and she didn't know where he was. The last time she saw him, he had returned home from work at about 3 p.m. and then left again at 5:30 p.m. and claimed he was going to have a drink at the pub with his cousin. She had not seen or heard from him since. Police now had a solid lead and a logical suspect in the case. The missing husband was Mark Hennessy. He was born in 1977 and was a 41-year-old father of 2 small daughters, one that was born in September the year prior, so was only 8 months old. He seemed like a typical married man, worked as a banksman on building sites. However, this seemingly happy family on the surface was not the same behind closed doors. Mark and his wife Nicola were not happily married. They were struggling and on the brink of divorce. Mark was in serious debt due to his cocaine habit. Many investigators would say that this type of stress can be a trigger for a normally placid, non-violent person to exhibit violent behaviors. Mark had a previous assault conviction where he headbutted a customer in a pub. He also had a DUI the previous year where he got into an accident while drunk and then he left the scene of the accident. In 1999, he was convicted of drug possession after being found with 100 grams of marijuana on him. So clearly his life was sort of just spiraling out of control. Mark had left home at 7:30 a.m. on the Saturday to go to work and then came home at 3 p.m. And I believe Nicola then took the Nissan out to get groceries. And then when she returned, he told Nicola he would be going out for a drink at the Ramblers Rest pub after 5 p.m. Nicola had no idea where Mark was. Police went to the pub he visited the day prior and confirmed Mark had indeed been there on Saturday just after 5:30 p.m., but he only stayed for around 10 minutes and watched some football before cameras captured him leaving at 5:41 p.m. and walking to the car park and then getting into his black Nissan SUV. He was seen on his phone inside the car for around 2 minutes and then he began driving. 30 minutes later, Mark was driving behind the 185 bus, the same bus Jastine was on. CCTV footage from the bus, which I believe had many camera angles inside, confirmed he was behind the bus. The next sighting of him was at 11 p.m. that night, back at the same pub he went to at 5:30 p.m. He spoke to a few people he knew at the pub and then he left. What did he do between 5:41 p.m. and 11 p.m.? And most importantly, where was Jastine? Police held a press conference that same day and revealed that they were on the lookout for a black 2017 Nissan Qashqai and released a description of Mark. He was 5'9", of slight build and balding. He was wearing a dark colored t-shirt, blue jeans, and gray runners at the time. Later that evening at 8 p.m., a woman named Christina was coming home from work and spotted Mark's car. She had seen the press conference earlier that day and knew the police had been searching for it. And in a very daring and honestly very dangerous move, she decided to follow the car. At the same time, she called the police and notified them of the car's location. Christina and Mark both pulled in to the Cherrywood Industrial Estate. Christina then decided to not follow Mark anymore because she realized he had noticed she was following him as he kept looking at her through his rearview mirror. An armed Garda response unit quickly arrived at the scene, being very cautious as they weren't exactly sure what they were dealing with. Although it was after 8 p.m., it was still bright outside. Police approached Mark's car and told him to come out with his hands up. Mark refused, so a police officer approached the driver door and drew a gun and pointed it at Mark. Mark was holding a Stanley knife. He then quickly cut his left wrist in one swift motion up to his elbow. The police officer then tried to smash the driver window, but it didn't shatter. Mark then grabbed the blade and pointed it at his neck. One witness at the scene named James, who was watching the entire standoff, stated that Mark looked like he knew everything was over for him. Mark then placed his hands on the steering wheel and just shrugged. The officer then shot into the vehicle, wounding Mark, but the bullet ricocheted off his shoulder or his collarbone and then into an artery, killing him. The police quickly removed Mark from the car and placed his body on the ground and searched the car for Jastine. But Jastine was nowhere to be found. Paramedics worked on Mark, and as he was dying, they begged him to tell them where Jastine was. But Mark was pronounced dead at 8:38 p.m. A blood-stained note was found in the car. It was difficult to make out what was written because it was dripping in blood, but the words "sorry" and "Puck's Castle" were able to be identified. Police quickly went to this area and searched for Jastine. Puck's Castle is a 16th century fortified tower structure located in Rathmichael, South County, Dublin. It had an external shell left with 4 walls and was surrounded in this thick, dense brush and woods. It was incredibly difficult to search this area quickly. The next day, May 21st, 2 days after Jastine was abducted, her body was found. At first, they found her bag, and by 3 p.m. that day, her body was found hidden in thick, dense greenery. It was clear Jastine had been deceased for a couple of days and was likely killed just hours after being abducted. An autopsy was conducted, and her official cause of death was asphyxia, caused by manual strangulation. Jastine's thighs and genitals had extensive bruising, but it couldn't be confirmed with certainty that she had been SA'd, but it was likely she had been. Her toxicology report found evidence of a small amount of cocaine in her stomach, and it seems like it was ingested a couple of hours before she was killed. Jastine's parents were devastated, and the local community were shocked. Her parents stated, "Jastine was our life, and when she was taken away, our world ended. We try to smile, but in our hearts, we are still crying." Jastine was loved very much by her family and extended family in the Philippines. Jastine was a kind, caring woman who was just starting her life when she was cruelly taken, hurt, and killed by a man she didn't even know. Jastine's body was taken back home to her native Philippines to be buried surrounded by her loved ones and friends and family. Her parents, Danny and Tess, permanently left Ireland, unable to deal with the loss of their daughter in the country they had come to for a better life and had grown to love. There was no evidence that Jastine and Mark knew each other or encountered each other before, but it was possible Mark had seen her working at the restaurant, or maybe even the first time he ever saw her was when she was walking down the road back home. It seemed to be a completely random abduction and murder. But what caused a married father of two girls at that, to hurt this random innocent woman? A timeline of events was put together by the police, so they think that Mark left home after telling his wife he was going to the pub. He goes to the pub that evening and seemed restless. He said he was bored apparently before leaving after only 10 minutes. Also, he told his wife he was going to have a drink with his cousin at the pub, but his cousin was never there. Police believed he noticed Jastine getting on the bus after the gym as he was driving. He then followed the bus until Jastine exited the bus. He then followed her and snatched her off the street and drove her to Puck's Castle. Police believe this was clearly a crime of opportunity driven by a sexual motive. At Puck's Castle, he would have forced Jastine to ingest cocaine before assaulting her, given the bruising on her genitals and thighs. He then killed Jastine and hid her body in the brush. He then returned back to Rambler's Rest pub at 11 p.m., but only really loitered in the pub. He didn't even order a drink. Witnesses state he didn't seem to be in any distress, after killing someone. No one knows what he did after that for all those hours before he was confronted by police almost 36 hours later. His wife Nicola had been trying to contact him for hours, and he finally answered the phone at 8 a.m. on the morning of May 20th, the morning after he abducted Jastine. Nicola asked where he was, and he said he had slept in the car on the seafront. She then asked him if he was coming home, and he replied with, "Soon." Police also believe he had committed similar crimes in the past because although it had seemed opportunistic, it also had traits of someone who had done this before. They ran his DNA through the database to see if it matched other cases, but there wasn't a match. Although there wasn't a match, Mark's description matched that of a man who would harass women at train stations over many years prior. He would often expose himself to them and harass them, talk to them, and maybe he started off with that and then moved on to more sinister crimes. We will never really know. Mark and his family had only lived in their home for 3 years, so were not well known in the area, but they were well respected. Neighbors described him as quiet and a bit of a weirdo, but otherwise a pretty normal guy. The shooting of Mark during the standoff had been investigated extensively, as it wasn't the Garda's normal training. They were trained to shoot at the center area of the body. They don't shoot to kill. However, the way that the bullet allegedly reacted was claimed to be a chance in a million. However, the way the bullet allegedly reacted was claimed to be a chance in a million for it to ricochet the way it did. It's extremely sad that Jastine became a target of Mark's during perhaps an episode he was having, because forensic psychologist Patrick Randall said that random killings of women, such as that carried out by Mark, are extremely rare. Although this stat is not comforting at all, but nearly 90% of the 216 women who have died violently in Ireland since 1996 up until 2018, they knew their killers. And over half of the perpetrators were partners or ex-partners of these women. So that in itself is a bit scary, but shows how rare these random killings are. There were reports that Mark tried to contact his cocaine dealer after killing Jastine, perhaps indicating that he had used the drug very often, but many people have tried to link him with being high during the act, but I don't think it really changes his actions. Forensic psychologist Patrick Randall said Mark's behavior on the night of the murder indicated a chaotic and disturbed state of mind and the absence, clearly, of any clear planning. The fact that he did it in front of witnesses without a care also indicated that he was in a frenzy. Now, 7 years later, Jastine's parents, Danny and Tess, still will never know or understand why this happened to their only daughter. They will never have peace or understand how such evil can exist in this world. In a really, really sad form of closure, only after Jastine's death did her parents find a letter she had written to them before her death. In this letter, she is thanking God for blessing her with them as parents, thanking them for all the sacrifices they made for her. She wrote, "I'm so lucky that I have you as a part of my life. Because of you, I have overcome all the trials in my life. You're always here to guide, protect, and give all I want. Thank you for everything. I love you so much. But I tell you, I will make you really proud of me. The worst I can get now, the best I can get in the future." She wrote that before signing off, "Your loving daughter, Justine." Honestly, that is heartbreaking. I can't imagine the pain they felt reading her words. And as you can tell from this letter alone, Justine seemed like such a kind, genuine, loving, sweet person who would have had a great life. Unfortunately, she only got to live 24 years of that. Rest in peace to beautiful Justine. And honestly, Mark's family has to also live with the pain in what he did. You know, I'm hoping his 2 daughters and wife Nicola were able to distance themselves from his crimes and live a happy life too. This case really upset me when I found out about it because I was just like, I know random killings do happen, but just like she was just walking home and then Mark saw her and, you know, was in a state that he wanted to do something. Because I was thinking, when he told his wife that he wanted to go to the pub for a drink, what was he really thinking? Was he planning to hurt someone? Was he planning to abduct a woman? Or was he really like, I want to go have a drink, but when he got there, it wasn't like making him feel the way he maybe thought it was going to feel. And then he left and then he saw Jastine and then that was his plan. Like, and that's another thing. He doesn't even look like a scary man. He doesn't look like a man who, you know, could be capable of that. But anyone can be capable of anything. And that's just the most terrifying thing. You could be walking down the street next to a murderer, next to someone who's got the most vile and vicious thoughts. Oh, and it just gave me the creeps. And it's just so sad. Justine looking out to those cars, to I think Gareth and Susan, for help. Maybe she was thinking she was going to be saved, but Mark, like, I don't even, you won't even know because he's dead. What was he thinking? What was he doing? And why did he do this to her? It's just so unfair, and life is just so unfair sometimes, and it just makes me so mad. Let me know your thoughts about this case down below, guys. I'll see you in the comments and in next week's video. Besitos. Bye. Don't forget to check out Scatter Slots, guys. Head on over to the link in my description box, or you can scan the QR code on the screen and receive a huge bonus, 12 million free coins. Love you guys.